All right. So good morning. My name is S.Charlebois. I run the blog Soap and Water, where we talk about issues related to COVID-19 and how everybody is coping. And this morning, I happen to have the pleasure of meeting with Kamalyn Kaur, and she is the author of Taking Control of a Controlling Relationship. Is that right? That's the. Did I get
That's
the?
correct.
Okay, perfect.
That title.
Okay, exactly. Which I think is a fabulous book because, as many of you know, during COVID-19, we are self-isolating, and when we're stuck in a controlling relationship, an abusive relationship, it can be quite stressful, to say the least, and even potentially dangerous. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this book today is because I've read it, and I find it to be incredibly insightful. And I would like to just hand that over to you, Kamalyn, and if you could tell us a little bit about you and why you wrote the book.
Right, so a little bit about me. So I am a trained and qualified psychotherapist and a personal development coach. I have a therapy and coaching business. I offer face-to-face and online services. And the mission behind the work that I do is to help people feel happier and healthier and stress-free in their life, in their work, and particularly in their relationships. And the reason why I wrote this book was because I was beginning to see certain patterns emerging in people, individuals, males and females, when they were in toxic relationships. So there were certain signs and symptoms that the other person was displaying that they were in a relationship with that were repeated, and they were repetitive patterns. So I remember in 1 week I actually seen 5 clients, and I remember having the same conversation with 5 different clients. So I just thought, if these 5 people are experiencing the same issues in this situation, there must be other people out there that are in a similar position. So the idea behind the book was to collate and collaborate all the signs and symptoms and red flags of a toxic, unhealthy or controlling relationship, and put them together in the form of a book. That was the reason why I wrote it.
Do you think you'd be able to give us an example, maybe a couple of examples of what red flags are? Because maybe some people don't understand.
Yeah, so red flags would be anything. So the other reason why I wrote this book was because this is another thing that happens. Everybody's interpretation of a red flag is very, very different. So what might be a red flag to somebody, it may not be a red flag to another person. So let me give you an example of that. So say, for example, I've been in settings where I've been in female company, and one person is talking about how their partner calls them all the time, and he calls all the time, and he checks in, and he wants to make sure she's okay, but she absolutely loves that. She loves the attention, she loves being called all the time, and it makes her feel secure, and it makes her feel as though she's wanted in that relationship, right? And that, in that instance, that's maybe not a red flag, because to that person, that's maybe what they want, and that's what they crave in that relationship. But on the same token, there'll be another person in that relationship in a similar setting experiencing the same behaviour, and that individual might say, well, my partner calls me all the time, I feel as though I've just left the house and I get a phone call, he's calling me all the time, and I feel suffocated, and I feel trapped, and I feel stuck in this relationship. So a red flag is any behaviour, any action, any comment, any verbal conversation that your partner has with you that makes you feel unhappy, insecure, it makes you feel not good enough, it makes you feel worthless, or you feel as though you're being criticised and judged. Now, I understand that there will be times in a relationship where a person can feel like that because of an argument, or just where headspace is at that point in time. You might be going through other things, but if this is a deliberate action on behalf of your partner, and it's happening on a recurring and repetitive and a persistent pattern, then that is definitely a red flag. A red flag of a controlling, toxic, and possibly abusive relationship.
Right. So basically, I think maybe we could sum it up as where you say you've laid down your boundaries with somebody and said, look, this is what I need from you, and repeatedly they cross that line, and so you feel as though your needs are not being met or respected, and in some cases I think it can lead to violence. Even not all toxic relationships are violent, but what would be the warning signs for a relationship that could turn violent?
So I think for any physical or violence to occur in a relationship, the emotional abuse starts first. And this is why I wrote the book the way that is why I focused on emotional abuse, because if you cannot be emotionally manipulated, it will be really hard for the other person to get to that physical or violent stage, because you will be out of there straight away, because you know what is right, what is wrong, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So usually what happens is, before the physical violence takes place, the emotional, what's the right word here? I don't want to use breaking. The emotional chipping away at your emotional state of mind or your confidence starts sooner.
Right.
So it's little things that you need to look out for, because this is the only way the perpetrator gets away with it.
Right.
Because at that point, even if they are violent, they will be able to emotionally manipulate the situation to make it look like you are making a big deal about the situation, or you are overreacting in that situation,
right.
or it's not that big of an issue as much as you have made it. So they will minimize your feelings and make you feel as though you've made an issue out of nothing. Whereas if you haven't been emotionally chipped away at, or your confidence hasn't been broken, then at that point the clarity is there about that's unacceptable behaviour. So the first things that you need to look out for is signs of emotional abuse. So that would be criticising you, putting you down, judging you, berating you, belittling you, making fun of you in front of other people, constantly criticising you. So the things that are the strengths that you normally have, so these are usually the things that the person has been drawn to you in the first place with, right? So they might be drawn to you initially because you were intelligent, or you were attractive, or you were bubbly, or you had a really vivacious personality. Like, so all of the things that they said that they were attracted to initially, they themselves then become an issue for the person.
Right. And then I suppose too, as it progresses, isolation becomes a very big problem. And that would be my biggest concern with what's happening with COVID-19, because in an isolated environment, these people basically have nobody to stop them. And
First thing is to reach out and tell somebody, and I know that might not be the easy thing to do, but it is really, really important to find the space or the time to be able to let somebody know that you are in that position. If you feel physically unsafe, or you feel physically uncertain about being in that environment, then you need to get out of that space. You need to make a call, you need to reach out to a family member, and you need to let them know that you or your children are physically not safe in this environment, and you do not want to be in that position anymore.
Right.
Now, of course, you might not have access to a phone call, you might not have access to phones or texting, but if you can get out of the house, even making some kind of an excuse, that would be the key. So the key is to actually notify somebody and let somebody know. But also what happens is, once you verbalize it, it's out there. So it's really hard to take that back. And I think when we verbalize something and we tell somebody, that action is really important, because in a sense what you're doing is you're acknowledging the issue, and you're acknowledging that something isn't right. And that's the first step towards creating any change or any movement.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I hear of a lot, and is this idea that when you put it out there, still people kind of looking at you and minimizing. So it's like kind of a cognitive dissonance that comes in, from people around you who say, "Oh, come on, it's no big deal," or the other thing is that once you've said it, maybe you weren't sure, maybe you were wrong, right? So you say, "Oh my God, I said such a terrible thing about this person. Oh, they didn't deserve it," and then you backpedal. So this also seems to be quite common with people who are in toxic relationships. What are some of the symptoms that a person can use to recognize that they might be in a toxic relationship within themselves, in terms of how they might be feeling, and the confusion, the insecurity, right? Fatigue,
So what happens is there's a different set of changes that will take place within you. So mentally, you'll start to notice that your thinking habits change. So you will start to feel as though you're not good enough. You start to feel worthless.
Right.
You start to feel that no matter what you do is never enough. But the other thing is that you will notice that there is a shift in your confidence and your self-esteem levels. So you will notice that change. And by that, I don't mean that it will increase. It will definitely always decrease, right? Now, the other thing is you also notice a shift in your feelings. So what you'll probably notice is you'll either feel really anxious all the time, on edge, as though you're walking on eggshells, or the other thing that will happen is you will not have the anxiety response, but you will have an anger response. So
Right.
what you might need to be aware of at that point is things like you feel irritable, you feel frustrated, you feel angry, or you get moments or episodes where you feel completely out of control because you're so enraged by what's happened. Right?
Triggered, right? You're feeling triggered.
Yeah, so
Right.
usually, and that's the fight and flight response kicking in. So those are usually telltale signs that you're feeling really suffocated or really stuck in your situation.
Right.
But depending on what your personality is and what the other person is like that you're living with, you will either have a fight response or a flight response. So the fight is obviously the anger and the frustration and the irritability kicking in, whereas the anxiety response is the flight. That's the flight response kicking in, which is where you disconnect from everything and everyone that brings you happiness or joy. You start to withdraw, become really quiet and reserved as a person, and you're almost scared to express an opinion because you just know that you're going to be shut down any second with whatever you say.
Right, exactly. And I think people can experience a bit of both, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't have to be all flight and all fight. It can be somewhere in the middle. And and it can kind of vacillate between the two. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. But the other thing I want to just highlight here, this is important because usually what happens is before your brain gets a chance to catch up with what's happening, your body will tell you that something is not right. So if you are in a toxic relationship, you might start to notice that you feel elevated heart rate, you might experience heart palpitations, you might notice that there's breathlessness going on, which is like obviously directly as a result of your heart rate changing. You may develop a lot of tummy issues as well, like so gastrointestinal issues. You develop a lot of issues around that as well. And then in general, your body will feel exhausted and tired all the time.
Right.
So these are some of the ways that your body lets you know that you're not in a healthy environment.
Right, exactly. And let's say you do leave that environment. How long would it normally take for a person to start to feel like their old self again, or to work through the process of healing? Like, how would you recommend that a person go about that?
Okay, so first of all, it's different time scales for different people. So essentially, when you leave a relationship like that, you will go through a grieving process. Although you've not physically had a bereavement, there's a loss of that relationship, a loss of the person that you once were before you entered that relationship. So you're now going to have to rebuild yourself. So that is where the grieving process takes place. So a grieving process usually takes about a year and a half to complete, right? But again, it's different for different people. The other factors that would influence the grieving process is the type of support network that you have around you, who is there to help you, how quickly you get back into a normal routine. So if you were working before, if you can get back into employment, start getting back out there, socializing with people, integrating back into communities, that can sometimes make it easier for you to feel like your normal and usual self. So these are all the factors that would influence how quickly you bounce back from a relationship like that.
Right. Well, listen, I want to just touch base on your book a little bit. One of the things I noticed that when I read it is the way that you laid it out. Would you mind explaining us to why you did it the way you did?
Yeah, it's so simple, isn't it? It's such a simple layout of the book. So that was actually deliberate, and the reason why I laid the book out like that is I wanted it to be a practical, user-friendly guide with information that was accessible at a glance. That's what I wanted it to be, right? So now the reason why I laid it out like that is because I could have made this book really like as long as I wanted to, because there's so much to say about this topic, as you can probably tell from my answers. But the thing is, when somebody is going through a crisis, their rational brain is not in motion. Their irrational brain kicks in, which means the amount of information they're taking in is very limited, and their concentration levels are also affected as well.
Right.
So when somebody is going through a crisis, they do not have time to read a book from page to page to be able to identify whether they're in a toxic relationship or not. So I wanted somebody to be able to maybe notice some red flags within themselves, and then get to this book, open the book, and just at a glance be able to have certain words that jump out at them and help them connect with the fact that this is, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm going through in my relationship. So the reason why the book's structured out like that is so that people can access information quickly and get out of that situation sooner rather than later.
Listen, I want to take just a moment and thank you for being with us today. Your book is really excellent. I recommend it to everybody. We're going to be featuring it on the blog in the coming weeks and through our promotions. So, do you have anything that you would like to say to people who might be watching this right now and are trying to change their reality?
Yeah. So I'm gonna. Well, I have got so much to say. I think the idea is what should I narrow it down to? So first of all, I just think that don't ever let anybody minimize your feelings. It does not matter what anybody says. If you feel that you are unhappy in that relationship, or if you feel that you are being put down, or if you feel you are criticized, or you're humiliated, or you're made to feel like you're worthless, then your feelings matter, irrespective of how the other person describes it, or justifies it, or minimizes it. Do not accept that, right? Because this is a pattern that happens again and again, where the other person will minimize your feelings.
Right.
If you feel something, then it's important. That's the reason why that feeling has come back. So don't doubt your feelings. Do not think it's in your head. Do not think you're fabricating these feelings.
Right.
If you feel something, then you have to go with that feeling, because that feeling is there for a reason. And the other thing is, the most important thing is, and this is one thing that I notice with women again and again when they're in that relationship, when I speak to them about relationships, they will always say to me that the writing was on the wall from day one.
Right.
So if there is any feeling inside you, any emotion that something isn't right, you need to go with your gut instinct.
Right. That's great advice. Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to wish you a good day. And
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're my pleasure.